If crime is for
Hey
you, then this
guys.
is the channel for you. Today we are heading into another drastic, crazy story. We had to take a day off because that last story just
Below our little wings.
I had problems sleeping. I thought people was outside my house. But we're going into the Twisted Janitor Secrets.
What?
Twisted Janitor
Oh,
Secrets.
janitor.
Get your antennas on because we got to get our detective mode a lock in. I'm not coming with an early assumption this time, guys. I'm holding off.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and this old video takes us to a valley with a very strange and mysterious past. Not to mention present, over a 3-year period in this valley, there were a cluster of unsolved murders which still puzzle to this day. This case is absolutely terrifying and mind-boggling, and there are some suspects, but one I think we should get into in particular, because it's been rumored, hinted at, that he may be linked to probably the most famous unsolved serial killer of the last century. So, let's give it a go.
Lewis Clark Valley, I've never heard of these.
The Lewis-Clark Valley region is an area between the states of Washington and Idaho. Separated by the Great Snake River, you have Lewiston in Idaho and Clarkston and Minnesota across the river in Washington. These three cities make up like the metro area, and it's, the epitome of successful, beautiful American dream in the Pacific Northwest. It's exactly the kind of place where people hope to, raise their families and watch their children grow. Crime is as low as the unemployment rate, and neighbors know each other's names quite well. It's all very white picket fenced, and once the sun goes down low, it gets, quiet. Dead quiet. Our mysterious cases, today, they span several crimes going from 1979 to 1982.
What?
On April 28, 1979, 12-year-old outdoorsy tomboy Chrissy White, had gone to watch the parade that marked the arrival of the Asotin County Fair, and it was going to be another beautiful day. After school, young Chrissy had made plans to go to a friend's house and help prepare her horses for the Asotin County Fair. But while she was there at her friend's house, she called her mother Betty, saying that she just wasn't feeling very well at all. See, the previous day, young Chrissy had suffered from heat stroke, and it was still feeling like the after effects of it. Her mother, Betty, didn't have ready access to a car, and she also had another small child at home, so she told Chrissy, just go lie down, put a wet cloth over yourself, hydrate, rest up, and then come on home when you're feeling a little bit better that evening or whatever.
I know this is a different time and all, but that's crazy that mom is just like, oh, it's cool, you sick. I would have walked my little feet on over there.
No, but a lot of parents did that. When you go over and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to go pick you up. Like, if you're going to stay, make sure you stay. Well, no, she had a heat stroke the day before.
Yeah, but you don't see your child after having a heat stroke. I'm not going to send my child after having a heat stroke.
We're going off as if she did send her.
That's crazy.
Because she did.
That's a different time. Y'all over here boasting about y'all parenting back in the day. Excuse me.
Friend's house was only 7 blocks away from her own house, so Betty wasn't worrying too much. The day went on, slowly turned to evening to dusk, and Chrissy never came home. Now, her mother Betty simply thought that, Chrissy must have just felt better, and she went to the fair after all. Chrissy had her bike to ride home, and, Asotin it's not the kind of place where kids get, snatched off the streets. But then the minutes rolled into hours, and a mother's mild worry turned into full-on panic. She was looking at the window every 5 minutes. Then that turned into opening the door and sticking the head outside. Then that turned into walking the streets, calling her name to silence. It was like,
she didn't ask the parents?
Betty went around, she called up the friend's house, she called on the neighbors, she knocked around, but it was like Chrissy had ceased to exist. No one could find Chrissy. Somewhere in the 7 blocks between her friend's house and her own home, Chrissy had vanished. Despite a reward offered for information leading to her recovery and a long intensive search by sheriff's deputies, Chrissy has never been found. Even her distinctive white 10-speed Schwinn bicycle was never discovered.
What?
Her father even took to the skies when another local man offered him, the use of his helicopter. They were in whirlybirds going around the whole area seeing if they could find the bike, from the sky. And they could not. The bike was never found. In fact, no one even was able to come forward saying they had seen her during that short, couple of minutes bike ride home at all. Weeks after Chrissy vanished, pieces of her schoolwork were found in a farm just outside of town. There was a load of pages there just laying in a field, and the police thought that they had been placed there deliberately. They'd been torn out of her book and then deliberately placed there. Not like they were just thrown out a window or anything like that. The police seem to think that this was a taunt, that whoever did this was, look what I got. Whether or not that's true, the case soon stalled, gradually getting colder and colder.
Why did you have her school books?
Unless she took them to that friend's house, like with her.
Because if it's the weekend.
Well, back in the day, they probably let them go over there and go to school, spend the night, and do all that stuff.
That's why I'm a little shook right now, because I'm like, why do you have her school books?
It's a different time.
Like, how, did you go in her house like secretly at night and get her school books, or that's like a red flag? Like, how did you get her school books?
Then, on June 26th, 1981, 22-year-old journalism student Kirsten David was dropped off in Moscow town by a friend. Moscow town, by the way, pretty well known, I think at this point, from what happened there a few months ago with those horrific murders. So, this area, busy. Kirsten was expected to ride the 32 miles back on her blue 10-speed bicycle to Lewiston to meet another friend. This was at around 5 p.m., but she never showed. She never showed up to meet her friend in town. Kirsten now loved her bike. She was mad to get on the old pedaling. She just repainted it. She was excited to go for this bike ride from Moscow to Lewiston. And somewhere along that route, she just vanished.
They both rode their bikes home. Because they were talking about the bike for the little girl, and now it's her with the bike.
Well, I'm pretty sure, like, back then, though, like, that was, like, the common teenager life.
Don't throw out my stuff. Don't throw out my
evidence.
If
that's your... All right, I'm about to
Don't throw out my evidence. But they both rode their bikes, and they both...
Who is letting their child ride at 32 miles to somebody's house?
Well, she's not a child. That's an adult.
Who is going 32 miles? This ain't no marathon. And what is crawling on me? There was something on me crawling.
Or is it your skin crawling? Because of what you're watching.
No, that was something crawling on me. I think I didn't do nothing in this video. I ain't scared of this. I ain't scared. He ain't like the last one. Nobody outside no windows in this one, okay?
We don't know yet.
She was last seen coming down a hill on the way into Lewiston, so she almost made it. And that was it.
So somebody
a witness came forward in the immediate aftermath of Kirsten's disappearance and told police that he had seen a man on his own driving a brown Ford van. This guy had pulled over and was talking to a woman on a bicycle. The woman's description matched Kirsten's. Then on the 4th of July 1981, her family received the worst news possible. After an 8-day search for Kirsten David, fishermen out on the Snake River had found a body. It was Kirsten.
Found the bike.
Her body was found dismembered and wrapped in black plastic bags. It took the police multiple days to clear the river of the plastic bags. There were so many. The delay in recovering the various parts and pieces only led to a sense of fear that was already spreading in the small community. And that then soon blew out of all control. No one knew who had committed this horrendous crime, and no one felt safe. This was a young student who had been butchered and then dumped in Snake River. Now, at the time, nobody connected Kirsten's murder to Chrissy's disappearance at all. Sadly, as is so often the case, it would take another crime, an even more horrendous crime for links to begin to spiderweb out, and you begin to think that these cases are all connected. I mean, there was some similarities between Kirsten and Chrissy. Their names are kind of similar, but I mean, the killer probably didn't know that.
Yeah.
They were both taken while on bicycles. That was kind of it. Neither bike has ever been found. It was far from obvious that these cases were related until this. On Sunday, September 12th, 1982, what has become known as the Lewiston Civic Theater incident took place. You know that anytime you hear the something incident, you know shit's gonna get wild. In this one, they just got more terrifying because what exactly happened, we don't know, but something horrendous did.
I'm nervous.
The Lewiston Civic Theater sits in a quieter part of town.
That's a theater?
As soon as you're off Main Street, very few streetlights. Almost an eerie silence. Reading about what some people were saying about the area, creepy was the word that came up again and again. Maybe we can find out why. Jacqueline Miller, known as Brandy, and Christina Nelson, known as Christy, were as much friends as they were step-siblings. 21-year-old Christy was a cheerleader in high school, very artistic, loved to paint and adored animals. She had all the choices of the world, but was planning on becoming a vet. She loved just animals, feathers and fur. She was attending Lewis Clark State College and was working part-time at a drive-in. Brandy was 18 years old, known as very outgoing, very friendly, like ready to help anybody at the drop of a hat. The girls got on like a house on fire, better than most actual sisters ever would, and often just enjoyed hanging out and going around town together. Christy, being a little bit older, and in college she had her own apartment, Brandy would often go over, spend the night, sleep together. They were last seen on September 12th, 82, walking down the road, just going to a grocery store. And then they were never seen again. Now, when the first reports came out that Christy and Brandy were missing, the police didn't exactly, jump out of their seats. I mean, the first thing was like, college girls, they'd have gone off with some boys, they'll turn up eventually.
Really?
Our community is so safe, bad things don't happen here at all.
That's horrible.
That's for big city folk, not for us. They didn't really kind of start taking this very seriously at all, despite them missing their obligations, class, school, not contacting their parents, any of the usual sort of thing. When they did get their ass into gear, the investigators began searching the routes between both of their homes, between the grocery store, all around town, multiple times. They had just completely vanished, and they were expecting to come back. Christina had left a note on her door of her apartment for her boyfriend, who they were expecting to arrive while they were out for grocery shopping. She left a note saying, "Just gone to the grocery store, be back in a few minutes, wait for us." He was waiting for a while. So whether or not they actually got to the grocery store is undetermined. The grocery store in the apartment wasn't far, so they were able to search that pretty easy and found nothing. Then they began to think, you know what? Lewiston Civic Theater is like right there along the route, and they would hang out there all the time.
So the theater's now coming up. This case is wide open because I don't got enough clues.
Yeah, I don't have any clues.
I can't get nothing like the last one. It was in the house, you got the dad, you got people you can pick out. This one, I don't got any suspects. I don't got nothing. I just got a theater. That is it. And girls missing.
The bikes.
They going after girls. No other. It's just good girls.
Obviously.
That's all the clues we got. Can't even get me an early freaking, detective work here.
That's true.
Because
I'm not catching nothing.
Come on, give me something. Throw me a bone, bro, so I could just be like, all right.
Yeah, I so far I'm just thinking of the bikes. That's it.
Christina used to work there, and so they would just go there, chill. It was like their just hangout spot in the town.
She used to work at the theater.
So all eyes then began to point at the Civic Theater. Did they pop in there, and did something happen in there?
Is this where we're gonna get our evidence?
That meant that suspicion first fell on a 35-year-old man named Stephen Pearsall. Stephen, who had recently left the military, just so happened to work at the theater and was very close with both girls. By all accounts, Stephen was like a big brother to both of them. And what's more, we know Stephen was working in the Lewiston Civic Theater that night. A patrol officer had seen him using one of the side entrances to get in there. See, Stephen worked there part-time as a set decorator and also as the janitor of the theater, which, funnily enough, was Kirsten's old job. Stephen's girlfriend also confirmed that she had last seen Stephen when she dropped him off at the theater that evening just before midnight after a party. She told investigators Stephen had asked to be dropped off there, he wanted to practice his clarinet. And then he had some work that he just needed to finish up. All initial reports when the girls, Brandy and Christy, disappeared, it all seemed to point at Stephen. Police wanted to speak with him.
Why?
They just couldn't find him. He too had disappeared. Now the police never, initially they he took them, he ran away. No, he was a missing person too.
What?
He left his clarinet in the Civic Theater after he'd been dropped off there. And
or is he playing like he?
Yeah, he's playing it and called on himself or something.
Cause he a little suspect. You just come up missing.
How are these all gonna be connected?
But if he did pull that is a genius stunt. If he did leave his clarinet and stuff there, that makes he missing too. I mean, that's a bold move. It's like that last dude. He set it up. This.
But I'm just. I don't feel like anything's connecting yet. So that's I'm a little.
I'm going out on a limb. Okay, let me stick my little limb out. They're not giving me enough, so I gotta give myself something.
I can't.
He would take that anywhere he would go. Back at his house, he had left his wallet there, an uncashed check. So it didn't seem like his disappearance was voluntary.
Yeah.
What we know is that he walked in, and he just disappeared. There was a black hole inside the theater, and we presume Brandy and Christy both walked in there too. They also got sucked in somewhere.
Is it haunted? I don't know.
Then the grim and grisly discovery of both Brandy and Christy's bodies.
What?
That was 18 months later.
18 months later?
On March 19th, 1982. The girls' decomposed remains were found 2.5 miles north of Kendrick, Idaho, down a steep embankment off a highway by a teenager. The young fella was out there looking for cans to, trade in, get a couple of cents, whatever, make some money.
Oh.
He found a skull, was like, cool, thought it was a deer skull. It was not a deer skull. The authorities then arrived and they found 2 intact skeletons, and it had been so much time it was impossible to tell, what could have happened to them. But they were so near the road, it seemed like, they'd been thrown, their bodies had been thrown out of a car down the hill. Investigators have never released exactly how the girls died, but the pathologist who examined their remains did say there was evidence of trauma. And of Stephen, who was working that night, who was there that night, disappeared. No trace has ever been found of Stephen Pearsall. Whether he was involved with what happened to them, we may never know. Someone probably does, because there was one other person in the theater that night. That's 5 victims in 3 years. Christina White in 1979, Kirsten David in 1981, and Christina Nelson, Brandy Miller, and Stephen Pearsall in 1982. To date, there have been 0 arrests made in any of these cases, but that doesn't mean there's no suspects or know nothing about what happened. Notorious dickheads Henry Lee Lucas and his weirdo partner in crime, Otis Toole, both separately confessed to being behind all 5 of the murders.
What?
But, with pretty much all their confessions, it didn't take long to say, you're, full of shit. And then, so just stop talking. We don't care. They were not behind it. It's believed. So now's the part where I just have to give you a little disclaimer, because the main person of interest, and this is where you're going to get to see the spiderwebs, folks, he's never been publicly named by the authorities.
So, hypothetically speaking, them doing that, do they get arrested?
I don't know if it's a crime behind that, falsely confessing. I'm pretty sure there is something behind it.
No, I'm saying, what if they're saying they did it? Do you lock them up and go for it?
No, they go. I mean, but if they find out they're lying, they obviously you can't book them on a crime they didn't commit.
But that's what I'm saying. How do you arrest somebody that says they did this murder?
Yeah, but once you find out the evidence they didn't do it, you have to release them.
But there's no evidence. So do you go?
No, they probably found out they was BSing. They found out.
If someone said oh, I did this murder, how do you go? Because
when there's big cases like this, you got serial killers. People did it with Jeffrey Dahmer. People did it with all kind of people. They was oh, we the killer. I'm the killer. No, you're not. They're trying to be copycat. They call them copycat killers.
I don't know. Because I'm or unless I don't know if I know it's a law now. I think it is. It's something where after a certain amount of years, it just kind of gets deaded. I don't know what it's called.
Cold case, they're cold. But yeah, there's people all the time. They say they had big killers, and then people say, oh, it was me, and they find out they lying. You're not the killer.
Why do you want to confess to a lie?
Because they weirdos, like you said, weird.
Even though they've admitted he is who they think is responsible for this, they just don't have enough to put him away. His name, you can find it. It's kind of everywhere. But I probably just, for myself, probably just shouldn't say it. I'll say his name is Vance Loss. There are plenty of people who don't have the same qualms I do, including family members of the victims who were pretty much outright pointing at him saying he did it. And there's actually some documentaries where they're very happy to give this guy the L finger. As I said, Stephen Pearsall wasn't the only other person in the Civic Theatre that night when it's believed Brandy and Christy walked in. There was another set decorator that night there too. So you might just be thinking, whoa, Mike, what's this got to do with the other cases? Well, I hear you're barking, big dog. Remember Chrissy White, the first person who disappeared? Yeah. She was at her friend's house, and that's the last place we know she was.
Is the dad or brother of it?
Well, that friend of Christina's, her mother just so happened to have a boyfriend, Vance Loss. And Vance just so happened to be over at the house that day. He volunteered to police. He was the one who gave young Chrissy a wet cloth when she said she was suffering from heat stroke the day she vanished. He was at the house. Christina White's mother, Betty, vividly recalls the suspect being incredibly over-interested and over-keen, peachy keen, on being involved in the search for her daughter, which is something we see again and again and again of guilty people involving themselves in the investigation. Guess what? Vance Loss also worked in the Lewiston Civic Theatre the same night, and he was there. We know for sure he was there. He's even readily admitted he was there that night when Brandy, Christy, and Stephen vanished. Then there's 22-year-old Kirsten David. Well, our same person of interest, Vance Loss, drove that route between Moscow and Lewiston, the same route Kirsten would have been cycling on that day. He was known to be living in Lewiston at the time. Completing the whole kind of circle, the old weirdo circle of the whole what the shitness is going on. Guess what? Kirsten Davis also worked in that same civic theater.
Now I need to see the sketch again. I need to see the sketch. Does it look like him? Because the guy had glasses.
Yeah, the mustache. It almost do.
Now I gotta see the sketch again, though.
It's not off, but it's close for sure.
So maybe she was cycling home. A guy who she used to work with pulled over. They began talking. Next thing you know, she's gone.
It's not bad, but I mean, back in the day.
Now, in an interview about what had happened at the Lewiston Civic Theater the night the 3 people disappeared, he said he had been there. I was there, but he'd hurt his back. So he had gone down for a little rest, a little nap, and he'd fallen asleep. And that was it. Slept through, didn't hear, see nothing. So he'd been asleep at the maybe crime scene. Contemporary investigations of the theater have led investigators to believe it is a crime scene, but it's a theater, right? There's been hundreds, thousands of people coming and going through it at all times. It's impossible to try and get any evidence there at all, even back at the time. You know, because there was a couple of days before the investigation actually ramped up. Productions on, meetings on, everything on, productions, all the whole thing. Now, our man Vance Loss also happens to have a long history of strange and worrying incidents, seemingly being in the wrong place at the very worst of times. Let me just say, once again, I reiterate, I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm not saying he did anything, but another way of putting it would be he's like the Forrest Gump, but for murders. And that's not only our case, there's plenty more. A couple of years after the Lewiston Civic Theater incident, on July 27, 1987, Vance Loss's girlfriend, a former nurse, Claudette Valiva, passed away by an overdose, and Vance was the one to find her.
Vance
Usually that would just be a very tragic, terribly dark and sad event. But again, with this guy, there's always like a little nugget of, that's odd, because she used to work as a seamstress for the Civic Theater too. It all comes back to the theater. Then there's the California mortuary incident, and this is like really dark. At one point in 1972, when he was living in San Jose, California, Vance Loss was seen by a witness trying to break into the Willow Glen mortuary. What? When the police caught up with him, he was found in possession of a 12-inch knife, a flashlight, and a camera.
What?
When asked why he was at the mortuary, he told the police he was there to, quote, see his girlfriend. Inside the mortuary that day was the body of a 17-year-old girl named Antoinette Anino, who had tragically drowned and been found on a beach in Santa Cruz. She was not Vance's girlfriend, by the way, and in fact, looking into it, there was zero connection between the two of them at all. So, despite somehow going equipped, locked and loaded for something much worse, he was only ever charged with trespassing. Also, just to say real quick, there's a couple of other murders that have happened kind of nearby to him. He's always at a scene where murders just sort of happen. Like when he's growing up in Chicago, a young girl, 8-year-old Diane Taylor, she was brutally murdered in Chicago in 1963, and she lived in his same neighborhood.
Oh, no.
This same man, Vance Loss, is also a lot of people's pick for the Zodiac Killer. Now, he was in the Navy. Here's a picture of him. Stick some specs on him, he's pretty similar. Oh wait, he did wear glasses! He joined the Navy and was discharged in 1968 in Oakland, California.
That is my movie, and I've always watched it. Like, that's my case right there. Like, that thing, that is him! They never caught him. They just always had a clue like it was him.
Well, this is like that. This is like a story like that. Technically.
So if he did Zodiac, oh my God, that just blew my little mind into pieces.
That's crazy. They had a picture of that little girl with him.
That is crazy.
That's creepy.
Zodiac murders happened. So, and it's believed the Zodiac also had a military background. Once he was discharged, our boy Vance Loss was in a motorcycle accident, leaving him with a limp. The Zodiac had a limp. His sister worked in the San Francisco school district. And he was hanging out with his sister all the time, so he had a lot of excuses to go to San Francisco. He worked as a used car salesman, which means he had access to all different sorts of cars. He remained in California until 1975 when he moved to Idaho. And a few years later, the first murder/disappearance that we know of occurred. Now, having said all that, the authorities, they did come out and say they believe, they'd have identified the main person of interest in the Zodiac Killer case, Gary Post, which was anybody else disappointed to find out that the Zodiac's possible real name was Gary? It's just, no offense to Gary's out there, it's just...
Really?
Gary. The police and families of the victims clearly think that they know exactly who they want held responsible.
Okay.
The suspect can't be named because he has never been charged with the crime, but Nichols says he admits to being in the Civic Theater the night Stephen Pearsall disappeared and when the women were murdered. He also lived at the house where Christina White was last seen. Gloria Boberts, Christina Nelson's cousin, has spent years now looking into this suspect.
He always seems to be in where people have disappeared. He admits to being at the Lewiston Civic Theater.
After the murders in 1982, law enforcement began to look into this man's possible involvement.
Well, he initially gave a couple of interviews to law enforcement and then no longer wished to cooperate with law enforcement.
Detective Nichols says he then moved to the other side of the country, and even though he's thousands of miles away from Asotin County, she thinks about him every day.
I mean, I would definitely like to interview him. And I have since the day I started the case.
Many people ask, why hasn't he been charged?
You have to be able to prove everything, and in a case this cold, it becomes even more difficult because witnesses have left, passed away, forgotten.
But she's not discouraged, and she continues to follow
Is he even
leads.
still alive?
And now I'm kind of at the point where I'm trying to collaborate with the Lewiston Police Department, and we've been working on going through the files and cleaning them up and looking at what we have.
Do you still feel like there's hope to solving these cases?
Yeah, it can happen. It can definitely happen. I mean, it could be tomorrow, it could be 20 years from now, but it could happen. And so as long as there's that possibility, I'll keep working on it.
And Detective Nichols' outlook gives the families hope.
So you might be wondering why, if everybody is so sure this guy, Vance Loss, is behind the Lewis Clark Valley murders, why hasn't he been, arrested? Why isn't he been charged? Why are the police even not naming him publicly? They'll name him privately as their person of interest, but they won't name him publicly. And the answer to that is it's circumstantial. There's no direct evidence tying him to any of the murders. Maybe it will come up via DNA, who knows, but with all of the cases, it's so out there. It's so hard. I mean, the first one's a disappearance. The second one, she was in the river for couple of days. The third one, they weren't discovered for over a year later. Two of the victims are still missing. He is currently living on the East Coast, a fair bit away. He could be a perfectly innocent guy, of course, but, it's just odd.
That's very odd.
And still to this day, the mysterious terror remains in the Lewis Clark Valley. The people that were Christina White, Kirsten David, Christina Nelson, Brandy Miller, Stephen Pearsall, are all remembered, are all memories. People still, these many years later, sit and miss them for a minute. But then a shadow hangs over all of them. That is the monster that got away.
That's crazy. So he pretty much got away with murder.
This one...
Imagine him... No, I'm trying to be funny, but imagine him watching this. Like, I did that.
What if he is a Zodiac? He's still out here.
What if he's still alive and he watched this and be like...
It's so crazy to think.
They had all this somewhat... I get it's evidence, but then I get it's not evidence. So it's like, okay, you just happen to be at these places every time. But
it's never good when somebody dies, but all the reactions we have done on this channel so far,
I think this one
someone has been caught, and it chaps my little ears to know when no one's caught, like for these murders. These type of cases right here, because then I get to be detective mode, like.
So they never got any type of justice for
no closure.
Wow.
These type of cases send me to research and stuff.
I think that boy died because he tried to protect them, and
Probably.
he ended up having to kill
These
him.
type of cases right here make me go look at stuff, and I become detective. I'm on my phone till 1 o'clock in the morning looking up Vance, whatever. What was his name? See, that's why I don't need to know his name, because I'll be looking him up. See where he at.
Well, you say you watched his movie.
I didn't know it was him. No, I didn't know. I gotta go back and watch it now. I didn't know they had a Vance.
I don't know that movie. I don't remember.
That
But
movie
it's
is
so
very...
sad. I think this one kind of blew my little mind.
I thought somebody's getting caught.
I don't like these. I don't like when there's no
one that
justice.
still out there in the world, just wandering around.
I didn't like it. I don't know. This one was kind of off because I was just like,
But as always,
What
a
if he
drop.
time traveled?
You know what? A drop, y'all opinions.
I just feel like the picture is just creepy. How are you in the picture?
He in every picture.
But maybe because he was in a Marine. I think it was they said he was.
Well,
in
I
a
mean, he
Marine.
in every person that got murdered. He
No,
around
I'm
it.
saying I think because he was in the Marines, like he knows how to like do certain things that they teach you in the Marines. Possibly, I don't know.
Drop y'all opinions down below. Was he guilty or not? Do
What's
y'all
your
give him a
verdict?
guilty verdict
What
or
is
not?
your
I'm
verdict?
saying guilty as charged.
I'm saying guilty.
Well, guilty it is over here. But thank y'all for tuning in. Drop another story off. Let us know y'all next reaction y'all want us to do. See y'all in the next one.
Bye, guys.